Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Big Duke 6 Eagle thrust. Put on sidewall off. Sing it loud. And the Romeo Foxtrot, shall we dance?
You are listening to the SITREP podcast, your source for everything related to historical wargaming. Whether you are looking for the latest wargaming news, reviews, painting tutorials, or playthroughs, you will hear about it right here. So grab your favorite beverage or brush and let's hit it.
All right, everybody. This is Bill, SITREP 6, and you are listening to our D-Day special for the SITREP podcast. Joining us is the crew. We have Marty and Chris stateside, and then we have Big Jim, our historical editor, down in sunny Florida. And over in the grand old country of the UK, England / Britain / whatever else you like to call yourself, Mr. Gaz. Guys, welcome to the D-Day special. Are you ready?
Yes! Let's do that. Yeah, let's get it doing.
All right.
Get it done.
Okay. So, as typical on this show, we like to go around the table and see what everybody's been up to recently, since you had an extra week. Just real quick, this is our D-Day special. We'll be talking about a lot of things D-Day related, but there's also another major battle that was happening in this weekend 2 years prior to D-Day, and that was Midway. I'd say that was almost one of the big turning points in naval warfare during World War II in the Pacific, because we pretty much knocked out most of the Japanese major carriers in the Pacific at that time. So that's another one to think about as well. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and start. Jim, why don't you start us off today? We'll save your voice as much as we can.
Okay, so what have I been up to lately? A little bit of painting, believe it or not. I finally finished that BMP that community member Madman sent to me a little while ago. That came out pretty good. It came painted already. It was like a pre-built miniature 20 millimeter, but I wanted to do it again because it came in specific UAF markings, Ukrainian Armed Forces. So I wanted to have that BMP. BMP is obviously a very common vehicle. They use it all over the place. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to have it a little bit more generic, so that I could use it in, former Yugoslavia, Georgia, Ukraine. I could use it in all the Eastern European hotspots. So repainted that. That came out pretty good. And we've been building and running a lot of games. We ran Anzio for Memorial Day last week, and we are running San Miraglis for today, later on in Valor and Victory. The first major, or not even major town, the first town in general that the Allies managed to, specifically 82nd Airborne, managed to liberate for the liberate in France during Operation Overlord. So a lot of design, a lot of research, and a little bit of painting, but yeah, mostly design and research.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Chris, how about you, bud?
Not doing much. Believe it or not.
No, we believe it. Pretty much. We get it. Marty?
All right, so I have completed my last session of physical therapy, and I am starting to get back into the groove of things. I have not yet started painting. I still have a little bit of numbness in my left arm and hand, so holding small things for fine motor movements can be a little bit of a challenge, as well as I have to make sure I maintain good posture or else my pinched nerve acts up.
Mm-hmm.
But in lieu of painting, because I got some shit that I am so ready to get back at, I cleaned up the hobby room a little bit. I have made my space ready for work. So I haven't done much, but I've got the area prepped and ready to go now, and because it was a hot mess, not gonna lie. So I'm looking forward to getting into it and being able to get some painting done here shortly. And we talked about this a while ago. I had a friend of mine who is a SF operator who got shot down. Helicopter got shot down on his last deployment to Afghanistan, and we were looking at doing a diorama / game table of that. So I've kind of been working on the planning for that, and because of the space, I can't do it in 28 millimeter. So I think maybe I'm gonna have to scale that to like 15.
Okay.
I've been doing the math on that and trying to figure out that layout so that way I don't have a board that's 12 feet long and 8 feet wide.
Sure. Gotcha.
But that's where I've been at this past couple of weeks.
All right.
So you're going to have to get a new Chinook helicopter model?
Oh, so yeah, no, that order got canceled. As it turns out, it's been on back order for 2 months, so I'm like, the hell with it, and I just canceled it.
What scale is 15 millimeter?
1/100?
Yep.
Question mark?
Yeah.
Yeah,
1/100th.
roughly 1 to 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could always 3D print a Chinook if we need to, or whatever you need. Actually, we can 3D print just about everything. There's so many files available now, so if you can't find what you're looking for.
Well,
I mean, a lot of the Team Yankee stuff that's out there, you could yeah, we could figure it out. So.
Oh, hey, speaking of Team Yankee, so as you know, or may know, I'm the commander of our DFW post, and we had our district meeting 3 weeks ago-ish. Yeah. And so after our meeting, I was having a cocktail with a couple of the boys, and as it turns out, we have a guy that doesn't normally go. He was there as a delegate for his commander who couldn't make it.
Okay.
And this guy says, "Hey, because I had my Sit Rep podcast hat on. He's like, what's that about?" Because he thought it was something military related, and I'm like, yeah, sort of. So I kind of explained to him what the show's about, whatnot. And he's like, so you use like little models and toys to play games? Like, essentially,
models and toys.
Say toy one more time.
Right.
However, he's like, so my dad passed away a few months ago, and he's got boxes and boxes of these little tanks. I'm like,
whoa.
Go on. And I think it's like Team Yankee scale stuff. And he's like, yeah, they're all metal. They're about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. And I'm like, really? Well, so he's like, I was, going to just get rid of them. I'm like, well, I'm your guy. Go ahead and get rid of them. So he and I our schedules have not been able to sync up yet, but I have no idea what it is. He hasn't sent me a picture or anything yet. So whenever I get that, I will have something new to share, and we'll see what we can use it for.
Very cool.
I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah. Well, if they're metal, they're not Team Yankee. Team Yankee's all resin and plastic. But you said 1 inch, 1.5 inches. I mean, I'm looking at my GHQ. I think that's too big for GHQ size. So they could be. Jim, help me out here. What do you think?
Well, if they're too big for GHQ and they're an inch and a half is definitely too small for Team Yankee, which is 15 mil, 1 to 100. They might be 10 mil.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Either way,
Yeah.
it could definitely be used in something.
I mean, right? Yeah, and the price is right. He's like, oh, we just got to get together. I'll give them to you if you're going to use them. I'm like, all right.
Score.
we'll just add this to the armory, so to speak.
Very cool. All right.
In the armory.
Sir Gaz?
Hello. So I blew the dust off some Blood Red Skies midweek.
Uh-huh.
Took out some Messerschmitt 109Es. Had to play around one of them. Did some color testing on it. Got to the end of the session. Weren't happy with it. So that's going into a bio strip pot this week.
Why were you not happy with it? Just so people can understand.
So I tried doing a little bit of speckling with some sponge, but I believe the sponge was too soft.
Okay.
So it didn't give me the level of control that I wanted. And the amount of pressure I would apply would then mean I was putting speckling where I didn't want it.
Gotcha.
I tried a little bit of it on the back of the wings. Weren't happy with that either. But sort of isolated down the basic color scheme that I want. Tried some stuff with the contrast that worked initially. The yellow and where I want the yellow on the aircraft, I was happy with as well. So when I'm painting a group of models, I think there's 6 in the box set from the Blood Red Skies.
Mm-hmm.
I generally paint one completely, doing changes and chopping around and resetting with the prime colors that you can paint from a pot, certain areas that I'm not happy with.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I've finalized a full model from start to finish, I make notes as I go. And I have a separate notebook that I keep all my paint recipes, I suppose is probably an easy way of saying it, for a miniature or a miniature's style and color scheme. And then I can always go back to it in the future and apply the same again or add aircraft of the same type or take away. And adjust it over time as well. So just not happy with the overall look of it. I did 2 layers on the spine of the aircraft that darkened it down too much. Some of the speckling wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I hadn't established where exactly I wanted the yellow. I was just throwing colors at it. But the yellows, I'm happy with the color scheme, just not where I put it initially. And it was a fine session. I plan to try and use that this week to do a video of me stripping it. So we're going to go the other way.
All right.
So I'll chuck it in a pot on my table one night this week, get the camera over it, and then do just it'll be a short video we'll probably put up on the channel about stripping and an option for stripping that's available in the UK and maybe in other places as well for plastics.
Excellent.
That way.
So are you going to do like a time lapse on that, Gaz?
Yeah, I was going to speed it up. So
Cool.
You'll see me sort of dunk it in. I'm going to see if I can get a small digital clock to put next to it so you can see the actual 45 minutes later. We take it out, we brush it in soapy water, we put it back in. I'll do that a couple of times to see how clean we can get the model.
Very nice.
That's awesome.
So it was also primed with spray. I think, what color did I use for the spray? I want to say it was either grey sea spray or wraithbone. So it was either a cream or a very pale grey. So I'm interested to see if I can get that back off as well. If the agent for cleaning the paint off also lifts some of the prime color. So I'll use the aircraft that I've not primed yet because the other 5 have not been primed at all as a measuring stick, a yardstick for how clean we get this model and how many attempts it takes.
Sure. Well, that'd be interesting.
Just a bit of info.
Very cool.
Yeah. And on top of that, my friend has dropped off a book because later this year or towards Christmas, he's looking to do a little bit of a campaign. So he dropped off a campaign book for Bolt Action, the Sea Lion campaign, for me to have a look at what Germans I've got to field a force against the British.
Interesting. All right. What was Sea Lion?
Oh, might get Jim in here, depending how croaky he is. I've got the book in front of me, luckily, so if Jim's feeling a little under the weather, he can sort of step back. So it was Sea Lion was a potential German invasion of Britain in 1940.
Okay.
It was a perceived threat, so the book itself is built around the perceived threat, not a threat that actually happened. And that means that you've got a lot of stuff in here that are units that may physically have existed, but didn't ever touch English soil, essentially, or landed in the UK.
Oh, okay.
So you've got all sorts of forces, from the standard regular stuff that you'd see to the Coastal Defence Forces of the UK that obviously never engaged in that sense.
Okay.
For the German side, you have very... what was the film where they used a submarine to get into the small English hamlet?
Are you talking where Eagles dare?
The Eagle has landed?
Yes.
The Eagle has landed where German paratroopers.
Yeah.
Right.
But Donald Sutherland came in by... No, Donald Sutherland came by parachute. Somebody came by submarine at one point, right?
They were going to escape by
Yes,
boat.
escape by submarine.
They were going to escape by E-boat, by like a German motorboat.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was any submarine involved.
Oh, okay.
At least not in that movie.
So it kind of has that sort of feel to it, as in it's got it's a little sketchy, it's a little outside the box in some of the forces that are in the options for this, and it's got its own campaign book. It's just ready to go.
Oh, very cool.
So I've got a basic set of German early war, and Mark Fields he has a home guard force, which I love.
Has he got Dad's army?
Yes.
Excellent.
He's done a Dad's Army force. The whole force is Dad's Army, including miniatures that are militia, and they're the local farmers, and they've all got hoes and rakes, and they come out with all that as well. So there's some really nice characterful miniatures. There's trucks with, mounted vicars on the back in what looks like an upside down dustbin, which is kind of just thrown together as best they could. So it's got some really nice character, and hopefully we'll see about getting some games, and then we'll see what the ability for me to get it on camera is.
Very cool.
We did a full 5-part Operation Sea Lion analysis article series on Tabletop a little while ago, and it definitely could have happened. It absolutely could have happened. Whether or not it would have worked or not is the issue.
Right.
Could the initial landings have been successful? Absolutely, because you have to remember how absolutely not prepared Great Britain was at the time. They had just pretty much lost everything they had as far as heavy equipment and vehicles at Dunkirk. They had a small force of 20 or 30,000 trained troops. They had a big force of militia and troops that were being trained, troops that were being rapidly organized to sort of fill in those losses. But they were often armed with nothing bigger than a rifle. So anything bigger than a Vickers machine gun, they just didn't have. You can't go up against Fallschirmjäger divisions with that. You can't go up against the bulk of German 16th Army, which was the unit flagged to carry out that invasion. Whether or not the British Navy could have stopped such an invasion is up for debate. A lot of people like to say, well, the British Navy would have definitely stopped the invasion. I find that highly doubtful. However, I don't think that the Germans could have maintained the impetus of their advance in the face of Royal Navy pressure. The Luftwaffe and the U-boats could have kept that channel open for a day or two, but you need more than a day or two to conduct an actual invasion. You have to have that thing open for months, if not years, and I don't think the Germans could have done that. Also, the British Navy was a lot weaker than a lot of people tend to remember. Their battleships, what they had almost no carriers. They had maybe 2 or 3, but even their battleships were very old, and they were scattered all over the world. What was actually available in the home fleet wasn't very much. I think it's a lot more possible than people realize, at least to start. However, barring some kind of political collapse in Great Britain, which wasn't going to be likely after Dunkirk and after Churchill took over. Before Churchill takes over, you have that whole Chamberlain thing. The Germans were going to reinstall somehow Edward VIII. I mean, there's this whole. It almost gets into the realm of fantasy at that point. But outside of some sort of a political or a morale collapse in England itself or in Great Britain, which doesn't seem very likely, I don't think it would have succeeded in the long run. Yeah. But to start with, and for a game, it definitely could have happened. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Gaz, along that theme, something for you, buddy.
Real quick before we move forward, and that's assuming the Germans won the Battle of Britain.
What's that?
Of course they didn't.
Yeah.
That's assuming the Germans won the Battle of Britain, which of course they did not.
Yeah. So there's a little quick clip of who you think you're kidding, Mr. Hitler, from Dad's Army TV show. Can't play too much or else we get smacked in the, So as far as me, real quick to wrap this up, I have been busier and busier at work. It's ridiculous. But I have been doing some research on I got a special edition miniature that came with the Epic Battles American Civil War starter set. I believe it's like a German soldier and a British soldier, like at Christmas time or something like that. I'm going to film a painting where I take an exorbitant amount of time painting them. It won't be one of my quick, how do you paint multiple guys quickly? It'll be one of those, I'm going to paint it to the best of my ability. And we're going to use it as a giveaway, in a future contest. So I'll be working on that. Speaking of which, I have not told the crew this yet, but this is I have these ideas that pop in my head, literally. So Wednesday nights is usually like our video live stream night. And unfortunately, due to real world events, sometimes things get in the way. Like I had planned on doing shows the last couple of weeks. And like I said, I'm not getting home from work until 8, 9 o'clock at night. And so that's obviously way past start time. And Jim has kindly been able to fill in once or twice. And Gaz filled in this past week. So what I'm thinking is that we're just going to do some recorded stuff and throw those up on Wednesday night. That way nobody has to rush to try and get something put up, and then it'd be a little easier. And then also it's summertime, and people are out and about doing stuff, They want to get, especially now that COVID things are starting to relax and restrictions. Like here in Illinois, the end of this week, we go to full-blown almost normalcy. There's no more restrictions on capacity in restaurants and a lot of things. There will be very limited masking rules in some of the bigger public arenas, like hospitals still and things like that. But so I can imagine a lot of people are going to be getting out and about to do things. So there might not be a lot of live streaming participation going on. So in lieu of that, we'll just put out some video content. And, whether it's a quick rule book review, a painting, some gameplay. There's some games I'd like to do some videos on. So, and that way, I can spend a few hours here, a few hours there, putting some videos together, and then just posting them, and then hopefully that will relieve some of the stress off the team. All right, let us switch gears here. So this is our D-Day special, and I challenged the team to 3 items. Gaz, what were the 3 items? Because I have 2. I'm missing the 3rd item.
So the 3 items that we were looking at discussing were a D-Day topic, something related to D-Day itself.
Yes.
A statement of in memory of.
Yes.
For somebody from that time.
Yes.
And a military figure that you'd like to talk to.
Perfect.
Past or present.
Perfect. All right. But before we get into that, you know what time it is, Gaz? It's that time.
I was so hoping it was next week.
It's news time with Gaz. Give me the latest and greatest news. Oh boy, it's news time with Gaz. Come on, give it to me. Give me the news.
Well, Gaz here to give you the news, apparently. Whether you want to hear it or not, just fast forward as required. Sometimes I wish I could mute myself. Oh, no, I can. Wait a sec. So we're going to kick off this week. We're going to sort of start modern and work our way back a little bit.
All right.
The first item for this week is Battlefront Miniatures, Team Yankee, where the West Germans are now available for, I believe, some items for pre-order and some items are starting to pop up on their store.
Mm-hmm.
This is quite an addition, really, of miniatures as a box set and giving you the option of a West German force. And I think it's quite nice to see that they're catering to what was the Berlin Wall is sort of still a thing in that setting. Yeah. So having 2 different forces, one for East German, one for West German, is quite interesting to see, as a lot of companies I doubt would do that.
Mm-hmm.
This new key box comes with a whole host of stuff in it, which consists of, stand by because there should be some interesting reading based on some of these words that I don't understand because they're not my natural language. So start off easy. Leopard 2A5 Panzer Zugs, you get 5 of them in plastic. Marder 2 Zugs, you get 5 of them in plastic. UH-1 Huey transport helicopters, you get 2 of them in there.
Nice.
M109 field artillery battery, 3 guns. M270 MLRS rocket launcher battery, you get 3 of. Panzer Grenadier Zug, a Fallschirmjäger Zug, a Wiesen FK 20mm Flugabwehr. Oh, this is where it goes wrong. Flugabwehr Zug. I apologize for any people out there that find offense at this, but I can only read.
Abwehr, it's air defense. It's literally the translation.
I'll go with that. 20mm, I'm going to go with air defense as well. A Wiesel TOW Panzer Bavair Zug. And a
command vehicle.
And a Cannonenen Jagd Panzer Zug, 4 of. So a mix of quite a few vehicles there, as well as some infantry support.
All right.
Now, at the scale it's at, as imagined, you get a lot more armor than you do infantry, but they've definitely not skimped on their infantry. They're really nice models, as we've found in the past with our World War II ranges. And it's a nice set. It comes with everything pretty much you need in it to use the Force, including cards to give you basically a cheat sheet for that vehicle, which they do as part of both of their gaming systems, this and Flames of War. So you generally have all the information to hand or right in front of you on the edge of the table. So when you're not sure, if you're not sure what's in the Force, what you need to roll, it's pretty much all on the card, as well as some special information on the back and any special abilities that are on that unit specifically. It's a nice Force. I can see people getting a lot of pleasure out of that.
It's meant as the initial force, right? As for someone getting in the game, this is a starter army.
Yes, it is. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Although it can be bought as individual units, or will be once they get through this initial stage.
Sure. Awesome.
That one that you read off, that was Panzer Abwehr?
Let me have a look again.
Or Panzer Befehl? I might have given the wrong translation.
Panzer Abwehr. Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's literally armor defense. So that's going to be some sort of anti-tank vehicle.
Yeah, it's a TOW. It looks like it's got TOW to it.
I think I misheard before. Sorry about that.
That's my bad. That was in brackets after it. I didn't get that far because there's more complicated words in that area, so I just avoided it. So yeah, a nice little box set, lots of vehicles in, always good value for money as well. Generally, Battlefront miniatures starter sets, you get a really good core for almost anything that you buy as a starter set from these guys, but leaving you enough pointage left to add the units that catch your eye or something specific that you want to cater towards. So really good.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I'm going to move swiftly on from modern to, Second World War, strangely enough. Mm-hmm. Now, Firelock Games, I believe, Bill, you and Dawn are well aware of through Pirate and Plunder in the past, and we've discussed them before in relation to that. They've just released a RPG for World War II called War Stories. Or they're building up to, should I say. Mm-hmm. They're playtesting the rules now. So, War Stories is a role-playing game using the Year Zero engine that is set during the Second World War. All the background rules and scenarios and ideas needed to run a game are centered around the harrowing exploits and extraordinary adventures of the 101st Airborne Paratroopers, or alternatively, you can do the 6th Airborne British Paratroopers.
What the flap?
You can play as the valiant heroes who parachuted into Normandy during Operation Overlord in June of 1944, and the campaign game will allow players to tell the tale of soldier characters, be them non-airborne, such as resistance fighters, the tankers. There's a number of options in there, not only airborne, that can be played as they collectively liberate France and drive towards victory. Above all, players will be able to create moments of valor and courage, ultimately weaving their personal tales into the fabric of history from D-Day and beyond. Now, we're going to bang up a link in this as well, and the link will take you to the page on Firelock. But also on there's a gaming group. They have a Facebook group in relation to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get some more information, ask questions, see the updates that are coming out, if you ping onto the Facebook group, you'll get more information as well. But something I was thinking about, I rarely see World War II RPGs.
Yeah.
It's a tough subject. And I've run World War II in RPG before. I ran a campaign. We called it World in Flames. It took about 2 years to go through. It does work, but your group, as far as an RPG group goes, your group has to understand what it is you're undertaking up front. And an interesting thing about this particular release is you have to define a scope. Because if you just make up like a generic, action game and you say, we're going to play World War II, and you give your you give your players pretty much whatever choice they want, your game is going to implode almost immediately. I've participated in like 3 or 4 World War II RPG campaigns. They all failed, like on session 2. And then I finally kind of took it as a personal challenge. I'm like, okay, I'm going to run this, and I'm going to have it done a certain way. And I ran it, and it ran for about 2 years, and we got to a successful conclusion. Not without hang-up challenges.
Yeah.
It's tough. And it's tough for a number of reasons. Or really, I'll just highlight 2, and then I'll give the mic back. Number one is World War II is so huge. Okay, the group has got to come together and sort of pick out, okay, are we all going to be British? Are we all going to be Americans? Are we going to be resistance fighters? Are we going to be Soviets? Are we going to be Japanese, Chinese, Spanish Blue Division, Ukrainian resistance? There's like literally, you can't just come out with a book and say this is going to be World War II. This is what I think. This is where I think they've definitely made the right call. They've started with their first release of this game being a relatively limited scope. You pretty much get to pick between 2 divisions. Really 3, because between the 101st and the 82nd, there's not going to be that much difference. But they mentioned specifically the 101st and British 6th Airborne. Now, there's going to be a lot of differences because obviously 2 different countries. And number 2, the other big challenge, and this is where you run across, we even ran across this a little bit in HK Ops, is do military-based RPGs really work? We've all been in the military. All of us here on the podcast. In an RPG, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or some like more generic RPG, there might be a party leader, but you don't have to do what he says. Okay, if you're with a squad out in the field and staff sergeant says do this, there's no debate. There's no there's the idea of a player agency in a military-based RPG really starts to fly out the window. And you have to have either an understanding of that, or at the very least, your group has to be cool with the fact that there will be somebody in charge, period. And is that going to be an NPC?
Or else we're going to tune you up.
Yeah, is that going to be an NPC? Maybe that's the game master or whatever. That way, no single player dominates the rest of the group. Well, that's cool. That way, you don't have the problems at the table that a lot of RPGs have. But at the same time, now your players feel like they're being railroaded by the game master. So again, it is possible, and it's just a little tricky to do anything military-based RPG-wise, and World War II as a setting, just because of its sheer scale. I've seen people do it once or twice. Okay, it works. Sometimes, but it's tough. And there's just a couple things you have to keep an eye out for. That might be the reason why you don't see more of it, to answer the question.
Yeah. Yeah, it does present unique challenges. My question is, what the hell? Why the 101st? Why? The 82nd made more combat jumps.
3 words. Band
of brothers.
Yes.
That's it.
It's definitely the hook, isn't it?
Yeah. Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan.
Let's be honest. There'll probably be guys in my unit now that may never have seen Band of Brothers because it's before their time.
Jesus.
Because I feel very old when the 19 and 20-year-olds are rolling in.
Yeah.
Look at me, and I've served longer than they've been alive. So,
you're an old war dog now.
Quite depressing, to say the least.
All right, moving
and then
on,
I signed
sir.
up, so I'm going to keep that paying for a few more years
Yeah.
when I re-up. So we'll move on to our final one because I don't want to hold the news up too much and I don't want to sort of keep loads of news points coming. So we're just going to have 3 today.
Okay.
The final one, we're coming back to Bolt Action. They're about to have a release. They're up for pre-order, I believe, as of yesterday. And the title of it is Incoming British and Inter-Allied Commandos. So we're starting to see some special ops guys coming through. They've got a new sprue package. Within that, you get a whole swathe of accessories. You get the green berets, or, well, whatever you paint them, but you get the berets. Or you can have them wearing the comforters that were sort of, they're well known for, especially for stuff like the Centre's Air Raid. Amongst the sprue itself, you get the Vickers K LMG, which I think is a lovely bit of kit and there's something a bit different. Thompson SMGs, Browning high-power pistols, the usual rifles, Piats, and light mortars, the 2-inch, as well as some sort of arms set up for throwing grenades, brandishing fighting knives, and machetes. So quite a nice little mix here, and you've got a little bit of play because, as we know from other bolt action releases, the head options are not restrictive, as in you have to do a mix. They generally provide enough heads to do pretty much all the models in one style or another. Mm-hmm. So kind of nice and pretty consistent in how they do that. The link has got some painted miniatures that they put up as well, and there's a great bit of them next to an item of armor that has some elevations and stuff down the side, which is quite nice. And yeah, it's a lovely little set. At the same time they're releasing that, they're bringing out a couple of new bits as well. So in support of the US Assault Forces, there's an M8 Scott HMC coming out, which is based off the M5 Stuart light tank hull with a 75mm howitzer on board. It looks like a great bit of kit. It's quite a punchy little tank. The barrel is so short on it. So yeah, interesting to see with a 50 caliber.
Which tank is this again?
M8 Scott HMC.
Yeah, heavy motor carriage is HMC. Is what it stands for. That's like a little. That's like an M5 or an M3 Stuart tank with like a 105mm assault howitzer on it, or something like that.
75mm.
75.
Howitzer,
okay.
Yeah, howitzer motor carriage.
Nice.
So it just looks like a really nice bit of kit. What I really like about it is the fact that it's also been used all the way into Vietnam. So it's something that you can transition from World War II into, future gaming as well.
A lot of that in the Pacific as well.
Yeah.
'Cause that's the kind of tank where you're not going to do anything against an armored vehicle with that, but who cares? Because 99% of the time you're not up against other tanks. You're up against pillboxes, entrenchments, fortifications, buildings, and that thing will make a mess out of any kind of infantry-based or artillery-based target much faster than, your big cats will, or your Fireflies, or your Easy 8s. In most kind of games, at least I find, armored, direct-fire, high-explosive weapons like that are a lot more useful than your Glory Boy tank stuff. Your actual tank killer, again, Fireflies, Easy 8s, Panthers, high velocity guns. You want a nice, big, chunky, low velocity round that makes a big explosion wherever it hits. That's going to clean out enemy entrenchments, bunkers, pillboxes that you run across a lot more often than you do enemy armor.
Yeah, if the scale looks right as well, Jimmy, it looks like it has quite a small footprint, so it'd be far more manageable in built-up areas to maneuver this thing.
If memory serves, it's based on either an M3 or an M5 light tank, so it's a small vehicle. Yeah.
Yeah. It's based off the M5 Stuart, the one that they've put up here. Great bit of kit, and as I say, it transitions from one period of war to another, so it's kind of a good buy if you're looking to play a couple of different periods. In addition to that, they're bringing out the British Army 5.5-inch medium howitzers. That was kind of a staple towards the late war, and again, they're carrying forward. So this also saw service in the Korean War, the Indo-Pakistani wars, and the South African border wars. So another bit of kit that, if you're looking to not only play World War II, but transition into other time periods, is a great purchase for the British forces. I think my favourite of the stuff we're going to briefly talk about, I'll save till last, but so from second to last, there's a Panzer Lehr squad coming out, so the Lehr division. So they've decided to put together specific infantry for that, which I love because I know that was built around the Panzer Grenadier Force. That's what my Flames of War force is built around, is the layer divisions of 1944. And interesting to see them actually start to dedicate infantry to certain periods and certain divisions. And I think that's a sign that they're not coming to the end, but they've pretty much covered all the generic baseline infantry types for certain forces, and then they looked more towards the specialist guys, the guys that were mounted in the half tracks, for example, in this case, and were good for tank hunting and all sorts, and doing literal drive-bys in the back of their vehicles to engage enemy troops as well, which is something completely different. But the final one we're going to touch, which I absolutely love, because Jim and I literally actively hunt online. I think Marty joined in on this as well, for ordnance being put into shopping trolleys and vehicles that maybe they weren't built and designed for. So the latest one they're releasing is the M6 Fargo, the 37mm GMC. Mm-hmm. In the back of a Dodge car, basically, is a gun platform, and it looks fantastic. Nice. Apparently it was used during the Tunisia campaign and saw extensive use by US forces in the Pacific Theatre, and over 5,000 of these things were built and put together. But it does look like a three-sided plate front with a gun sticking out of it in the back of a pickup, essentially. Well, not a pickup, a Jeep-like vehicle.
This was the dirty little secret of Lend-Lease.
Right.
So right when the Americans first came into the war, again, like you were saying, Tunisia, a lot of the American tank destroyer battalions and self-propelled artillery platforms did not have any M7 priests or M10 tank destroyers. I can't remember which one it was. We did the Baptism by Fire series on Tabletop. We talked about America's first battles in World War II, and they were an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
Sablitas, Sidi Bouzid, Kesserine Pass, we got our asses whooped big time. And there were two main reasons. Number one, we didn't listen to the British. The British told us, look, Rommel's going to come out. He's going to slap you upside the head with his little Mark IIIs and his Mark IIs. Don't chase after him, because when you chase after him, you're going to go over this ridgeline. He's going to have this screen of 88s, and he's going to, hey, British guy, here, hold my beer. I got this, okay? And then like 10 minutes later, the Americans come back with their, lips swollen up and their eyes busted open, and they're like, okay, I'll take that beer back. Tell me about those 88s again. Seriously.
At the same time, the English guy goes, "You call this a beer?"
Yeah. And then number two is we gave away way too much stuff to the British. There were, I can't remember, I think it was the 899th. I can't remember which tank destroyer battalion it was, but it was one of those that they didn't get the right equipment until December 1943. Because all of our M10 tank destroyer, or a great deal of our M10 tank destroyers, and especially our M7 priests were given away. I mean, it was the British that ended up calling them the priests. For us, it was the M7 self-propelled howitzer. We just gave them away. And when it came to actually putting our own armored divisions in the field, we didn't have anything left, because our industry, as powerful as it was still kind of gearing up. Mm-hmm. And that first big wave of output had already been given away to all of our allies, especially the British. So you see a lot of this stuff. T-19 is another one. They basically put a 75 millimeter howitzer in the back of a half track, and it's like basically firing over the driver's head. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that. You have it's terrible. It's I think I actually had to make up Panzer-Leader counters for what you're talking about. It's like a 37 millimeter gun on the back of a Dodge Studebaker, or a Dodge or Studebaker truck.
What I love about
we're supposed to fight tigers with this. We're supposed to fight tigers with this, but we gave away all of our stuff. It's a dirty little secret of Lend-Lease.
I love the image that they have up, so it's worth clicking on the link and going and having a look at it, because where they've got it set up, the gunner is by the gun, but I imagine, and don't get me wrong, don't take this the wrong way, there's an officer sat beyond the gun screen in the back corner next to the barrel with a set of binoculars, probably looking for the enemy vehicle. Mm-hmm. Now, whether the sergeant asked him to sit there or not is in question.
You go over here, sir.
You just sit here, sir, and keep an eye out and tell us when the vehicle's here, and we'll pull the trigger.
Yeah. Do get your binos out. Can you look for targets for us? That'd be great.
Let's go ahead and salute you while we're at it.
By the way, you're not allowed to speak. Don't say anything to the guys. They're working.
We often talk about like these crazy technicals or whatever. That's for like militia units or ISIS or, you know, the militia of the week, you know, terrorist group of the month or whatever. This was U.S. Army issue to frontline armored divisions, CCAs of our best armored divisions. That's all we had because we gave everything else away. At least eventually U.S. industry would catch up and we would be able to outfit ourselves as well as we outfitted our allies. But for a while, yeah, we were in really bad shape. I would say we, like I was there. The U.S. Armored Corps was in really bad shape as far as support equipment. We always had good tanks. Well, if you call the Sherman a good tank. But when it comes to anti-tank guns, self-propelled artillery, stuff like that, it's bad. All through North Africa, into Sicily, and even the beginning parts of Italy, it's really bad.
Yeah, you were in the Pacific, weren't you? Theater, Jim, not the Tunisian one.
Oh, me personally, I was at Valley Forge.
Yeah.
And that rounds up the news for this week, guys.
Fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and talk. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, before we close it out, I have one thing that I saw a couple days ago that I wanted to share right quick. So Spectre Miniatures and Blacksite Studios have teamed up, and Spectre is going to start offering their starter sets again, but it's going to come with some Blacksite Studio terrain.
Cool.
So they're going to have, let's see here, what does it say? So the kit will include the Insurgent Kill Team and DevGuru. So those are your figures. A second edition rule book, a starter scenario handout, bases, dice, and terrain. And their terrain, there's not like a full listing of it, but there's a picture on their website. And you get a building, you get some
like
walls.
A small hut.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know.
Small hut, low-level barricade. Basically, it's a vehicle checkpoint.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a good way to set it up.
It's got the barrier for push up and pull down. It's got the concrete palisades, all done in MDF. And this was to be on the next podcast news, actually. So,
Oh, way to go, Marty. Way to go.
I was always excited about it, though.
Marty, that's why Gaz is the news director.
So, Marty.
So stay tuned for Gaz's full report.
We've pretty much done everything. I've just gone across to the images of it and everything.
Wow.
But it'd be interesting to see what is actually in the full set and how it physically goes together. I'm sure Marty will be looking to pick that up at some point.
While we're still talking about technicals, just a quick shout out to our friend Chris, Chris from Canada, who has put out. He's been 3D printing, and he's 3D printed the Dushka on a shopping cart.
Yep.
Yes, the shopping cart of doom.
Yep, over there on our Discord. Check it out. It's great.
Yeah. So
I was like, if I could give this thing 20 stars, I would. I would have put in 20 little stars. Ding, 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 ding.
Absolutely.
All right, Marty, are you done ruining
the
news
now?
Okay. All right. And on that note, okay, so because this is technically our D-Day show, Gaz, since you were first to put on the running order, want to talk about your items?
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
So I'm going to go through I'll start off with the in memory of, because that'll be a short thing.
Okay.
So for me, this is in memory of Samuel Briley. That was my granddad. He was Grenadier Guards. He served during the Second World War. Somebody I never met. He passed away sadly before I was a baby when he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So although he saw me, I don't have a conscious memory of him. He was injured at Anzio. He lost part of his foot there, had it removed below the knee, and on returning back to the UK, was infected so badly they then cut from his hip down.
Oh, geez.
So lost the rest of his leg. And he was my father's father. And so for the memory part of it, today for me is about Samuel Briley. The D-Day topic. So one to kick around, and it's something that I think is very poignant, especially with today being the date it is, and that was how effective was the Ghost Army for the D-Day landings. And I know this is something that's was kept under wraps for a very long time. So it's one of them that I've never actually read what's been released directly. The information that I got was from basically a museum, but it was not spoken publicly about until 1985, for example, and was still officially classified until the mid-90s. So that says how important this potentially was. Jim, I don't know if you've ever read into the Ghost Army at all.
Yeah, it was called FUSAG, First U.S. Army Group.
Right.
And it's I didn't realize it was. Maybe the laws were different in different countries. It's mentioned quite prominently, just as an example, in the movie Patton, which came out in like 1971 or something like that. Although they don't go into details. So
apparently, it was in a newspaper article right after the war, but no one spoke publicly about the deceivers until 1985. That's from the Smithsonian. The knowledge of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was then public already. It was still officially classified until the mid-90s. But I imagine that's the minutiae, the details.
Yeah, technically speaking, the composition of chaw bomb armor is still classified. No one really knows what's really in it. We all know what chaw bomb armor is in our tanks, but as far as how you make it, or
how to put it together. Stealth technology, even communications. We have a lot of stuff like that, don't we? But I know it consisted, reading through, I'll just do a sort of a brief summarization of this article. It basically consisted of a strength of 82 officers, around 1,023 men under the command of Colonel Harry L. Reeder. It was a unique and top secret unit of the time, simulating 2 whole divisions, approximately 30,000 men. They used visual and sonic and radio deception to fool German forces during World War II's final years. They had actually an exhibit of this, which is where I got a lot of the information from, which was at the Smithsonian. And it was a really nice title, Ghost Army, the Combat Con Artists of World War II, which I found quite alluring. Armed with nothing heavier than 50 caliber machine guns, they took part in 22 large-scale deceptions in Europe from Normandy to the Rhine River. So all this is out there now, and it's really worth having a dig into all the information relating to it. The bulk of the units arrived in England in May 1944, shortly before D-Day, and the brainchild of Colonel Billy Harris and Major Ralph Ingerson, which were both American military planners based in London. The unit consisted of carefully selected groups of artists, engineers, professional soldiers, draftees, and some famed artists, such as fashion designer Bill Blass, painter Ellsworth Kelly, and photographer Art Kane. So from that, they managed to put together a ridiculously qualified group of soldiers with good officers. Many were West Point graduates from former Army specialized training programs. And it was said to have one of the highest IQs in the Army, averaging 119. I can think of 5 people in my section that couldn't put that amount of IQ on the table if they all stood together and took the same test. You added them up. They waged war with inflatable tanks and vehicles, fake radio traffic, sound effects, even phony generals, using imagination and illusion to trick enemies, and thought to have helped redirect forces around Europe to key places, making them not able to reinforce and move in support of other unit systems as well. So I think I tried to pick something that was probably a little less known about, and hopefully there'll be a few people that listen to the show that think, I might just have a quick look into the Ghost Army of the Second World War. Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
So FUSAG specifically, the deception efforts by the Allies against the Germans throughout most of World War II were really widespread. Another really fun one to read about is something called Operation Mincemeat. I don't know if this is run by the exact same bureau that Gaz is talking about, but if you ever get a chance to read about Operation Mincemeat, they literally scooped up the corpse of a bum who had died he had drank himself to death. He died in an alley somewhere in London. Mm-hmm. And they used his corpse. I'm actually not kidding about this. And they created this absolutely fantastic identity for him. They put him in, obviously in a British uniform. They handcuffed a briefcase to his wrist. They gave him theater tickets to a show that was actually playing in London at the time. They had to make sure it was for the right dates, and I mean everything. They went absolutely crazy on this deception effort.
Yeah, they made him look like a total spy.
And then they ditched him out of a plane off the coast of Spain. They didn't give him straight to the Germans. That would be too obvious. So they make sure the Spanish found him, and then the Spanish, who were pretty friendly with the Germans during most of World War II, would eventually send this over to German Abwehr, which is, again, the word for defense. It's basically German intelligence, non-SS related intelligence, non-Gestapo related intelligence. Mm-hmm. And that was about where the Americans were going, or where the Allies, I should say, where the Allies were going to land in the Mediterranean, Sicily or Sardinia. And that was a big deception that really worked. Specifically for D-Day, we're talking about FUSAG, First U.S. Army Group. It never existed. It was the fictitious unit that was pretty much created by, I think, the people that Gaz is talking about. Patton was supposed to be in command of that. Even though Patton wasn't really doing anything, they pretty much just put him up at a fancy hotel and said, sit here for 3 months. The room service is great. Don't destroy the minibar, kind of a thing. And how effective it was pretty effective. One of the big things that really worked with FUSAG was, again, it sort of keyed into another really great area of British intelligence, and that was the whole ultra source. We have the Enigma codes. The British had cracked the Enigma machine, mostly due to the Polish before the war even started. The Poles just gave an Enigma machine intact to the British. So the British get a lot of credit for cracking the Enigma code. However, the Poles don't get nearly enough credit because the Poles gave them the first big break in that they gave them a complete Enigma machine and the code books for it right before the war started. However, the machine kept being upgraded and the codes kept changing, so British intelligence had to really keep up with it. If you don't think that affects your everyday life today, this is the invention of what most scientists consider the world's first modern computer. So if you use computers in your life, you can thank the British at Bletchley Park. It was the first actual computational machine that would use some sort of binary-based mathematical logic to crack some of these German codes. As the German codes kept changing and those Enigma machines kept getting more and more sophisticated. And nevertheless, the British kept on top of it the whole way through. The British were reading the Germans' mail the whole way through the war, and they realized that the Germans suspected, just to begin with, that the Allies were going to land in Normandy at a place called Pas de Calais. It's a town in France. If you look at a map, it is right across the English Channel from Dover. It is where the English Channel is the narrowest, and it's where an invasion would be easiest. To kind of key back to what we were talking about before, this was totally going to be the avenue used by the Germans in Sea Line, when they were basically going to do D-Day in reverse. They were going to invade Great Britain from France. Now we're talking about invading France from Great Britain. The Germans say, well, we were going to do this 4 years ago. This was our plan. Let's just assume that they're going to do it the same way with us. And they were looking already at Pas de Calais. I think part of the very simple genius of this whole deception effort, and where we really get into what Gaz was talking about, how they were the con men, and this is kind of how a con man works. A con man doesn't start by telling you a lie. A con man starts by asking you some questions. They want to learn a couple things about you, and then they're going to craft their lie to reinforce perceptions you already have. So via Ultra, the British intelligence already knew that the Germans pretty much expected the Allies to land at Pas de Calais. And they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and reinforce that. We're going to make sure we're going to reinforce that pre-existing suspicion. And that was pretty much the whole point of FUSAG. How effective the rubber tanks were and the big inflatable vehicles that everyone sees on YouTube, and, oh, that would be fun to have one of those. I put it in my backyard and make a wading pool for my kids out of it or something. I mean, I honestly don't think that was very effective, because that's the reason they did all that was to fool enemy reconnaissance planes. Mm-hmm. I highly question how effective German Luftwaffe reconnaissance over Great Britain was by 1944. I don't think too many German planes were flying over Great Britain in 1944. What was hugely effective, however, was all that simulated radio traffic. They literally just set up like 50 different radio stations across the southeastern part of Great Britain, and just started sending radio messages to each other. They were pretty much almost like us, playing a game over Skype. They were just pushing these little fictitious units around over a telecommunications network. And if you didn't know any better, and if you just kind of linked into one of our Skype calls, you might say, holy crap, these guys are fighting a real war, almost like Ender's Game. Well, the Germans did think that. And they thought that an army group, that's got to be at least 12 divisions, were getting ready to invade out of Great Britain into France via Pas-de-Calais. Now, of course, we were going to invade France, but it was going to be several hundred miles away at Normandy. And here's where you get sort of the empirical evidence as far as how effective it was. For at least 36 hours, until at least midday on June 7th, most of the officers in the OKH was Russia, OKW, most of the senior officers, the staff officers in the OKW, were convinced that Normandy was a very, very large diversionary attack, and that the real attack was going to come at Pas-de-Calais. And that was 36 hours that several German panzer divisions, mostly in the 15th Army, and in the operational reserve of Army Group B and Oberkommand West. I can't remember the actual name for it in German right now. Basically, the commands of Rommel and von Rundstedt, they could have hit back very, very, very hard, while that beachhead was still very tenuous, especially at the Omaha Beach sector. And they didn't. Those panzers took almost 36 hours to get released from OKW reserve, because everybody from Hitler on down was convinced it's coming at Pas-de-Calais. The real one's coming at Pas-de-Calais. This is a great big deception effort. This is a big diversionary attack, when, of course, the opposite was the case. So how effective was it? For those first 36 hours, it was pretty effective, and those were some crucial 36 hours. So absolutely, it was very effective, in summary, for sure.
Wow. A lot of moving parts there. Okay, Gaz, who is your person you wanted to talk to? Gaz? Did we lose Gaz? Hello? Jim, you there? Uh-oh.
Apologies.
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, I was caught then.
Oh, sorry.
I was still on mute, strangely enough, and chomping away at my microphone as always. So the person that I would like to talk to is a captain in the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, called Patrick Leigh-Fermor. And it's a story that captured my attention quite a while back. There was a series done by the BBC in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, where they reenacted the SAO training, the Special Operation Executive training, and what they were able to teach them in the few weeks that they had them before they were dropped into, enemy-held areas of Europe. Patrick Leigh-Fermor, he was basically tasked with an unusual job. Him, alongside his colleague William Stanley Billy Moss, led a team that carried out the kidnapping of a German general on Crete. On the 26th of April 1944, together with the local resistance, they kidnapped General Heinrich Kreipe, then drove him through 22 German checkpoints in his own car before abandoning it and then bundling into the mountains. They were pursued by German forces, managed to make it to the south coast, and were taken by boat to Egypt. I would just love to, one, who came up with that plan? 2, how the hell did they get through 22 German checkpoints with a kidnapped general in the vehicle with them? I think it's just one of those really unusual stories from some of the smallest elements, the smallest cogs in the machine that was all the actions of 1944 specifically, and to make all the way to get all the way to Crete, to then kidnap a general, make it all the way back into Egypt is just mind blowing to me. So yeah, I'd like to have a chat with him and get how nervous were you when, checkpoint 2 and then checkpoint, did it just get easier, or by checkpoint 21 we're like, oh, we're almost there, please don't do it now, please don't do it now.
Very cool. Interesting. I had not heard of him. All right. Who would like to go next? Anybody? Or I can go? All right. I'll go. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll go.
Go ahead.
So, when I was thinking about D-Day, I kind of I got logistics on my mind because it was a crazy logistical feat in preparing, for the invasion. It was over 7 million tons of supplies that we shipped to the UK from the US, and over 450,000 tons of ammo, which just makes me jealous because I can't find a box of ammo I can afford these days. But can you imagine, the logistical effort there? Oftentimes in the Army, we would say that intel and ops is for amateurs, and logistics is for professionals. And being an ops guy, I always call BS, but there's a lot of truth to it. Logistics is not easy. It's a lot easier saying I'm going to attack this, that, and that, and come up with a strategy. But trying to the logistical train to support all of that and actually make it happen is a really tough nut to crack, especially when you look at we got to go across the Atlantic Ocean to do this.
Right.
I'm just amazed at the amount of stuff that we were able to push over ahead of that invasion in order to support all of those troopers that were going to be going into Normandy. So that was kind of my thought is, it's not just an operational achievement, but it's a huge logistical challenge prior to that, and then going forward as well. But especially, getting things prepped and just trying to get it across the ocean and ready to go and make it deliverable, to the coast of France.
Yeah,
that's a pretty amazing feat. So, props to the logistics dudes that were able to pull that off.
This kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. We were maybe unofficially comparing Overlord to Sea Lion. Could Sea Lion have started? Absolutely. Would it have worked? Almost certainly not. And the biggest reason is probably logistics. Also, the Germans didn't have any unified command. They didn't have an Eisenhower. The Air Force, the Navy, and the Army had their own chiefs, and they did not have an overall person in charge, at least until you got to Hitler himself. And Hitler was no military genius, suffice it to say.
Right.
But especially logistics. The fact that the Germans, their landing fleet was basically a whole bunch of river barges that they stole from the Dutch. They didn't have anything like a Higgins boat. They didn't have not only supplies, but special vehicles, special boats, special equipment. We talk about the Mulberries. They built their own port. I've seen the wreckage of this. I went over to Normandy a couple of years ago. I hit every single site there is. The wreckage of it is still there. They built their own undersea pipeline. This is stuff the Germans couldn't even conceive of. So as far as invading one way, yes, it would have worked. Invading the other way, it probably wouldn't have worked. At least not in the long run. Again, it comes down to logistics. Yeah, I completely agree.
Oftentimes, we think of the glamorous, which anyone that's been to war will quickly realize that that's a fallacy. But we think of the glamorous combat actions going on, and not how we get there and how we support all the people that are performing those actions. So that's why I said I kind of keyed in on the logistical side of this operation, and just what an amazing feat it would be, and what a nightmare it would have probably been to have to be the guy to figure all that out and pull it off.
You just feel sorry for me because I'm not feeling well today, so you decided to say something nice about supply. I appreciate it. I do appreciate it.
Well, one, you're welcome, and two, as a guy that's primarily done operations, throughout my 27-year career, I can tell you that while it's stupid when they say without supply bullets don't fly, it's also kind of true. So if you got to get your stuff there, or it doesn't matter how many dudes you got there. Now you got dudes that aren't equipped to complete their task. And this was a feat of just enormous magnitude. So, kudos to those geeks that were able to figure it out, because I'm sure there were some egg-headed dudes working on that.
Hey, and I'd like to piggyback off of that. in addition to the supply and the operations piece, it is the synchronicity of how, they were building the mulberries and, they were doing all of this stuff at the same time, and they all hit the same deadline. And, working with any long-term ops, they're like, hey, and this isn't anything on supply, but, it's like, sometimes ops doesn't know how this one thing is acquired, and we don't realize that it's not like ordering reams of paper, it's, a lot more to it. The complexities, and, they were running around England with inflatable tanks and stuff like that. How are they hiding, the material for the pipeline and the mulberries and just the enormous amount of stuff that had to be brought over? It was amazing.
Yeah, true that. Lots of moving parts there.
But synchronizing the deliverable.
Yep.
I guess, seeing that fail enough times, I guess maybe that's what really impresses me.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so for my memory, I have a couple of World War II vets and one's a Korea vet, but I wanted to make mention of them. So these are all comrades of mine that were in my VFW post and passed away this spring. So
Our
yeah. Mine. I'm the commander. I own and operate it.
maybe our comrade.
No, he's my comrade. I claim him all.
Anyway, moving on.
But Ed Oldest, Navy vet, served on the Saratoga during World War II. Earl McMahon, Army vet. He was an admin NCO. So that was the guy that pushed all your paper and got you your orders and promotions pushed through and all that good jazz. Another World War II vet. And then Emmett Healy, who was he's actually a Korea War vet, but I wanted to make mention of him as well because near and dear to our heart. Emmett was an artilleryman, and he was a part of the delaying action at the Chosin Reservoir. And I have a copy of his DD-214 that he gave our post when he to prove that he was eligible for membership. And on the back of it, he wrote, cursive in his handwriting, it says, "The worst 6 days of my life." Wow. I bet.
Chosin Reservoir was no joke, man.
Right, absolutely.
In Panzerleader a little while ago. Yeah, that's when you're in the Marine Corps, they definitely teach you about that one.
Yeah, and he was an Army guy. He was one of the one of the Army artillery units that supported the Marines coming out of Chosin.
Well, what's often forgotten, because the Marines get all the glory at Chosin. I mean, the Chosin Reservoir was a big body of water, obviously, and as the Chinese were kind of going around both sides of it, there were forces on both ends of the Chosin Reservoir. Army, I think it was part of 7th Infantry. The Army had at least half of what was going on at Chosin Reservoir. I mean, you ask most people on this, well, first of all, if anyone even knows what Chosin Reservoir was, but you ask anybody who knows the basics about Chosin Reservoir, it has an identity as a Marine battle, which actually isn't true. Even the British were involved at Chosin Reservoir, and our Panzerleader game of Chosin Reservoir, we were careful to include Army, British, and Marines in there all together. So absolutely, and Chosin Reservoir, man, that's a holy crap. That's every Thanksgiving. Every Thanksgiving, as you're having your turkey, remember the Chosin Reservoir. That's right at the end of November, 1950.
Yep.
Marty, what the amount of ammo or the artillery rounds fired?
Oh, so yeah, in 6 days, the Army artillery units there fired over 100,000 rounds.
Wow.
100,000 rounds in under a week. Can you imagine that? Because
when you're basically two battalions, one Marine battalion, one Army battalion, and you're being encircled by 8 Chinese divisions, divisions.
Yeah.
It's time to fire off some arty.
Yeah, absolutely. But, so I kind of have an appreciation for that. My first 3 years active duty, I was an artilleryman, and you're picking up that round, whatever caliber it is. They had all sorts of different stuff there, but you're picking that up by hand. You're putting that into a breech by hand. You're closing that breech by hand, and you're firing it by hand in almost all of these vehicles. So, it's not like an auto loading tank kind of situation. And I'm here to tell you, I'm 155 millimeter round. HE weighs, the bullet itself weighs about 78 pounds, plus the powder separately loaded. But that's a lot of humping.
Yeah,
that's a lot of dudes working. And most of those howitzers again are hand operated. It's cranks. It's dudes turning wheels to elevate, depress, traverse. There's some mechanized stuff, but the majority of it was not. So that's all the sweat of their brow and the strain of their back getting that stuff done. So just an amazing feat again.
And it's not like they had multiple crews for each tube.
No, generally speaking, it was you're assigned to this gun and you do it. Now, if a gun goes down, they would cross level those people to another crew, either to relieve them or to plus them up to full strength. But yeah, you and your gun section, and you're just having at it.
That's basically a wake for 6 weeks or 6 days.
Pretty much.
Wow.
Pretty much for those guys.
All right.
And the military figure that
Yep.
I would like to talk to kind of ties. He's modern. He's not World War II, but it kind of ties back into the logistics of it. And this would be the conversation I wanted to have. Would be General David Petraeus.
Yeah.
He ran pretty much ran the logistics for Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've met General Petraeus a couple of times. I've had a couple of brief conversations with him, but, at that time, we were talking, in 2007, 2008 in Iraq. So we weren't talking about the first Gulf War, but I would love to have that conversation, with that guy, just to see what kind of a pain in the ass it is to make all that happen, especially in a modern environment where your combat forces can literally, and in some cases did, outrun their supply train.
Right.
So trying to synchronize all that, I think that would be an interesting conversation.
I think, yeah, that would be interesting. All right.
All right. What you got, Bill?
Okay. So, for D-Day, believe it or not, this is my topic, and this might be a shocker for all of you. Our airborne forces, were they really necessary during D-Day? Shocker. The reason I bring that up is because there was a lieutenant colonel who wrote, I think it was in the Army Times about a year or so ago, about the necessity of airborne forces. He was speaking mostly in modern day, but he went all the way back to World War II and the amount of loss and the equipment required to move these people. And his point is that he didn't feel that they weren't necessary.
And they quickly retired him, right?
I don't know what happened to him. And you know what? And he was airborne. He was like with 75th, and I think he was with the 82nd at some point. But sometimes, but he went to war college and he's got advanced degrees, yada, yada. I think sometimes the more education you get, the dumber you get, in real life things.
Yeah.
So
he may have had to write a paper for the war college and was just looking for a good topic.
I mean, that's very possible.
Something controversial that people will pick up on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and something that I've gone over 2 million times already.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the old days we used to call it revisionism. Nowadays we call it clickbait.
Yeah.
Where you sort of put out a deliberately contentious idea. Now I don't want to steal the topic. I kind of know what he's talking about.
Uh-huh.
But I'll go ahead and let you finish posing his initial position.
Well, so, again, he was questioning the necessity or, the feasibility of airborne forces, saying, if you look at the amount of losses versus what was achieved versus the equipment and transportation modes that are necessary to move these people, he felt it wasn't an effective use of materials and troops. I respectfully disagree with him. I can't think of another way where you can move that many people in a rather quick and put them into a battlefield as quickly. Now, people will probably disagree with you and say, you could do this, but when you have a contested airfield or battle area, when you can drop basically an entire brigade, battalion, almost division, if you really had to, literally within 20, 30 minutes, depending obviously on the aircraft and what's available, put boots on the ground to cause as much disruption behind enemy lines as possible. Now in the modern world, people say, well, you got rockets and missiles and, drones and all that. But what is the ultimate goal of warfare? It's to eliminate the enemy forces and hold ground, right? If you can't hold the ground, you're not going to achieve the final mission unless you totally just eliminate the enemy, right? So, go ahead, Chris. What were you going to say?
No, to answer your question, hold ground.
Yeah. So, aircraft can't hold ground. Everybody says, well, it's an air war these days. It's all fought in the skies, and a lot of ships are outdated because everything's aircraft or rocket or whatever. But when it comes down to it, you have to hold the ground. So, if you need to get a foothold in somewhere quick so you can establish an airfield or, a place to hop off from, especially in a landlocked country, that's what you got to do. And you can put a lot of people on there quickly. Now, when it comes to D-Day, I personally felt that the airborne operation was necessary. Was it performed properly? No. I mean, there was all kinds of screw-ups, and, now it's not taking anything away from those guys. You got to remember, you got these C-47s flying in, the DC-3s, C-47s, and they're getting their asses shot off by all the flak and stuff that's, coming up at them. Speaking of the movie Band of Brothers, I thought they did a pretty good job of showing, what it's like to be in an aircraft, during, an airborne operation when they're getting, flak and everything, and, getting off the airplane and all that stuff. So, but, I personally felt airborne is necessary. It's just another tool in the arsenal. The more tools you have, the more options you have. So, there's a big, for and against. Being a paratrooper myself and being part of the 82nd, seeing how all the parts move together and what that division can achieve, I definitely see that tool. So, Jim, what were your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, again, I'm going to go ahead and restrict myself to World War II.
Okay.
This was definitely a question that a lot of people asked. Airborne troops kind of came out in 1930, or the 1930s. The Russians were experimenting with them as early as 1933. So airborne troops or paratroopers were going to be a big, or airborne operations in general, were going to be a big thing in World War II. And people were like, well, how useful is this? How is it worth the investment? Because they're very expensive. Number one, they have to be trained twice as hard, if not 3 or 4 or 10 times as hard. They have to have special equipment. They have to have a fleet of aircraft. Aircraft are very expensive, and they're really vulnerable. Air paratroopers on the deck are, meat on the table to anything, even inferior troops. So those inferior troops have half tracks, light armor, mortars, howitzers, anti-tank weapons. Mm-hmm. All the stuff that those paratroopers aren't going to bring with them, you're going to have a lot of problems. The Germans had some of the best paratroopers in the war, and they came to this conclusion almost in very short order. Crete. May of 1941. We recently did on the SITREP podcast. That was the last time the Germans ever dropped anybody out of an airplane. The decision was made. We are no longer going to use our Fallschirmjäger as airborne troops. It's just not worth it. We're just going to use them as, elite light infantry. And they used them as elite light infantry all over the war for the rest of the war, and they did very well. And, that almost kind of makes this guy's case a little bit. I mean, you get like the same amount of effectiveness for, 1/3 the cost. A lot of the other airborne operations that the Americans tried in the early part of World War II went horribly awry. The airborne operations that were dropped into North Africa were so far off target that by the time, I think it was the 82nd, by the time the 82nd reached the combat area, the campaign was over. It took them like a week to get to, we think the Normandy invasions were bad. They dropped them like a week off target.
Yeah.
Or 3 or 4 days at least. Sicily was a disaster. Sicily turned into one of the largest friendly fire incidents in the history of the United States military. With half of, I think, one battalion, I think, again, it was the 82nd, was blown out of the sky by American flak. Yep. Because they thought it was German bombers or something. In Italy, they didn't go so hot. In Operation Varsity, in the very end of the war, didn't go so hot. Like in March of 45, we tried an airborne drop into Germany. Market Garden ultimately failed. I don't know if that was the fault of the paratroopers, but nevertheless, it was an operational failure. D-Day or Overlord, I should say, was the only time that anybody tried dropping paratroopers at night. Nobody had ever really done that before, at least not like operational ground units, like commandos and special agents and spies. I mean, that's one thing, but as far as like military units, right, battalions, regiments, divisions, it was the only time anyone had done it at night, and it was kind of a train wreck. The troops on the ground definitely recovered quickly. Now, as far as whether or not it was, useful or not, when it comes to airborne troops or air mobile operations, now this is World War II, this is pre-helicopter. You basically have 3 stages. You have paratroopers, you have glider assault troops, and then you have what the Germans called the Flieger Division, which was like an air mobile division. And first you would send in your paratroopers, and your paratroopers, parachute on their back, jump out of the plane, and, do what they can do once they hit the ground. The glider assault troops, they need at least some kind of area where at least they're not expecting much resistance, or that the paratroopers have already secured. At least that's how the Germans kind of used to do it. And they would land the gliders in there. The gliders have more troops in there. Also, German gliders were very small compared to our gliders. And like our Waco gliders or the British Horsa gliders. Right. And the gliders would have like light artillery, even some very, very small vehicles. I think the British even had the Tetrarch. They had a glider-borne tank they could actually drop in there. I don't know how well that worked. But the gliders could bring in some degree of heavier support, so that your unit didn't have the life expectancy of a mayfly once it actually got hit by a serious enemy force. Right. Nothing against paratroopers. You can be as hard as coffin nails. When a German comes down the road with a 105 millimeter howitzer inside an armored vehicle, you're not going to last very long. All that training is not going to help you catch a mortar shell and throw it back. And then after that, the Germans would have what they call, like I said, the Flieger Division. They would just, someone captured an airfield, then we just fly in troops on those Ju-52s, which is pretty much their version of the C-47, the air transport planes. So were the airborne forces needed in Normandy? I would definitely say yes. They didn't wind up having the full impact that I think was expected, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So the reason we dropped in our airborne forces, I have a big map I'll actually show later on in the game that we're doing later today. Where the 82nd landed, where the 101st landed, and where the British 6th Airborne landed. They more or less, to be very quick about it, landed on the wings of the invasion force, and their job was to hold certain bridges, certain crossroads, certain roads, certain towns, to make sure that German armored reinforcements did not get into the flanks of the Allied invasion area. Yep. This is where you have Pegasus Bridge. Pegasus Bridge was gliders.
Yes.
So I don't know if gliders is what he's talking about when he says airborne troops. British paratroopers did not reach Pegasus Bridge until way too late. They even have a small inside joke about this in the movie The Longest Day. British paratroopers are there woefully late. The gliders were right there on target. I've been to Pegasus Bridge. I've stood at this spot. They have a little obelisk there that shows where Howard's first glider landed. And it's like the distance from me to my car out in my parking lot, like right now. It's like they landed the gliders right there. So the gliders were a lot more effective, I think, than some of the paratrooper units.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely held those bridges there at Caen, by Sword Beach on the eastern flank, and kept our units like the 21st Panzer from really developing any meaningful threat against, again, the British 3rd Infantry that was coming ashore there at Sword Beach. The Americans did the same thing on the other flank. There weren't really any German Panzer divisions there. Did we know that at the time? Probably not. Did we know how effective that deception effort that we were talking about earlier was going to be? And those German Panzer reserves were going to be held in place for 36 hours anyway. Again, a lot of times we didn't know how effective these other things were going to be. If those other efforts had not been as effective, or if some of these German Panzer divisions were not where we expected them to be, places like Saint-Mary-Église could have been extremely important.
Yeah.
If, those are going to be avenues for German counterattack. So I understand kind of where if I understand the premise correctly, I understand where the premise comes from. I probably disagree 2/3, but there is a case for it.
Yeah. No,
and the Fallschirmjäger syndrome, to coin a phrase, it takes place for the Americans as well. Later on in the war, probably the most important battle the 101st would fight is at Bastogne, where they did the tailgate jump. They jumped out of a truck.
Yep.
And again, if you actually take a look at the track record for if you take an honest look at it, and you say, okay, I'm going to forget the fact that I'm an American. I'm going to forget the fact that I'm a veteran. I'm just going to look at this in the analytical, objective view. The airborne record is not that great as far as success rates. So I kind of see where he's coming from. I don't know if I agree, but I do see it. I do see the position.
Yep. No, I mean, there's always, a point to be made. Not, I agree with some of it. I could counter some of those things, like in Africa with the 82nd being, dropped so far off their actual LZs or DZs. That's where the Pathfinders were created, was after that, because, they didn't have those people on the ground to bring in the planes. And then the friendly fire instance in Italy, that was just poor communication and identification. Not throw the Navy under the boat, but it was the Navy. But, it was a developing thing, and as time has gone on, we've had to adjust to the needs. But it'll be a topic, it'll be like everything else. People say, well, is the tank necessary these days? So regardless, it's always the for and against. I just thought it was I personally think even though with people missing drop zones and the stupid D-bags breaking their lanyards and people losing their equipment, and having those things passed out very last minute as they're prepping to jump instead of training with them created a lot of things. There were so much moving parts and last minute decisions that affected some of that as well. So on top of that,
can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Send my 2 cents in there. Now, even though I'm aviation and we train from the beginning of never leaving a perfectly functioning aircraft, I don't think you get rid of airborne troops. You minimize the risk of their use, that whole risk assessment thing.
Uh-huh.
But you don't get rid of that tool. You don't get rid of that option.
Right.
You want the enemy to think, these guys can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
And just that threat. I mean, I know it's not old time, but what was it when Colin Powell was Secretary of State? He told the dude in Haiti, what was it? The 82nd in the air.
Yeah. They literally were wheels up in the air. They were just a couple hours out, and then he, capitulated. So,
yeah. So, it's easy to pick on the 82nd, but there is a bunch of respect there.
Yeah. All right. So, for who I'd like to remember, his name was Staff Sergeant Bill Cheney. He was my crew chief instructor over at the National Guard unit I used to belong to. Believe it or not, this was what, Chris? It was right 2000, 2001, right before, before and during 9/11. He was actually a Vietnam vet, and he was still, in 2000, he was actually active guard. So he died in Iraq after 9/11. They never disclosed the cause of death. I just got a message saying that he had passed while over there. They didn't say combat related, but something else. So who knows? But he made a great impression on me. From telling me his experiences as a crew chief door gunner on Hueys during Vietnam, and and bringing those experiences over to Blackhawks, and everything he taught me, and he was just a really awesome guy. They don't make them like that anymore. So every Memorial Day, I think of him. So, and there's other friends and people I know that we've lost, but he's the one that comes to mind. And then for my war historical person, I know this is not World War II related or D-Day related, but I would love to have a sit down with General George Armstrong Custer. And the first question I ask is, what the hell were you thinking?
Don't accuse him of thinking.
Because I really want to know, was he as arrogant as people make him out to be?
I'm not an expert, but I do know he was intensely unpopular among other cavalry officers in the Federal Army in the Civil War.
Really? Okay.
Guys like Sheridan, Buford absolutely couldn't stand the guy.
Wow. Now, was that because...
I don't know. That's literally all I know. I don't know if it was justified or if they just didn't like his hair or he stank or whatever, but they did not like him.
Gotcha.
He did have glorious hair, though.
He did. He did.
At least the painting.
And my understanding is that when he was killed, they did not scalp him. They left his hair, which I find,
Oh, I'd have totally taken that if I was them. That'd be hanging over my mantle.
Right? So, the reason being, outside of just the questions of what were you thinking and why did you do that, that goes against everything you were taught at West Point and blah, 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 is he was, believe it or not, he had an impact on my life as a kid. Because I spent 3 years from, how old was I? Like 7, 8, and 9 years old at Fort Riley, Kansas. And that was the home of the 7th Cavalry before they started their winter campaigns and their campaigns up north, which eventually led to the Little Bighorn. So his house is there. It's now a museum. The Cavalry Museum is at Fort Riley. So, we in school learned a lot about the Indian Wars and the cavalry and, Old West in general. And, I don't want to get political, but, people these days say we don't learn a lot about alternative history. It's just whatever, certain people decided we want to read in the books. That's not how we were educated in Kansas back in the 70s. We learned about, Wounded Knee and, the horrors that American Indians went through during, those times and all that. So it wasn't all, yay, U.S. Army, cowboys versus Indians type thing. We really learned the history. So it made a huge impact in my life. And, I've read books and things about Custer and Little Bighorn. I have never been to the battlefield yet. I eventually would like to go. And I do have a game. Jim makes fun of me because I have all these games. I have the Alamo, the Little Bighorn, Isla and Wanda, Rorke's Drift, and he makes fun of me that I have all these Last Stand games. I just find them interesting. What people were thinking during that time. How did they react, or how could you change history? I mean, look at even 13 hours, or 13 days, 13 hours. It technically was a last stand. You're surrounded by the bad guys. And so I like the idea of the human fortitude in conflict, and how do you come out of it? Do you come out of it bravely, regardless of the outcomes, or is it a total flop? So that's it for me.
I don't know if I've ever made fun of you for it, but it is something I have noticed. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things you pick up on. I've always kind of said, especially more recently, I can tell what kind of wargamer somebody is by asking them who their favorite character in Kelly's Heroes is. There's just certain things that you kind of pick up on. It's like, hey, all these games that Bill likes to either play, read about, or whatever. There's a certain theme kind of running through them, and it's interesting.
Yeah. I like the test of the human spirit, or fortitude. So, and then how does it equate to military success or defeat? So, all right, guys. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Because we're getting close to having to wrap the show, because Jim and I have a date for St. Mary Glees. So go ahead.
I don't have all three of the questions for you.
Uh-huh.
I know this might be a little, cheesy, but someone from the past that I would like to talk to would be my father. Every Memorial Day weekend, he would get tore up, remembering his buddies that he lost in Vietnam, and he would never talk about it. And I was hoping after I came, because I knew I was going to Iraq, I was hoping that when I came back, he would be able to open up with me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he passed before that. So, it'd be nice to be able to talk to him about that.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense. I appreciate that. And again, this long ramble we had today, some people are going, what does this have to do with wargaming? We gave you meat. We gave you substance to think about different scenarios, different conflicts, information as how you could relate this to different war games, whether it's miniature-based or, board game-based or hex encounter-based. There are so many options out there. Like today, I have Avalon Hill Midway sitting downstairs, and I have the D-Day, Avalon Hill D-Day, and Jim and I are going to play Valor and Victory here shortly on the live stream. And I'm going to be playing the good old All-American Division, the 82nd Airborne, as we jump into St. Mary Glees. Try
to.
Oh, no, we will. There's no try. There's no freaking try.
Yeah, gravity still works. They'll
Right.
fall out of the plane.
So,
whether it's there or not,
Well, let me put it to you this way. As my dear, dear idol Yoda would say, do or do not, there is no try. So we will. So,
how about this? You guys, you're not piloting the aircraft.
So, yeah.
You might need the force to get there, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Man, all the haters, I tell you. Yeah, so. All right, guys. But, yeah, that's, when we go on these long rambles, it's all war game related because, it all ties up to giving you the meat and thought, brain power to think about how do I play this? Or, I never thought of that. Maybe I should try that. So there you go.
Or who knows?
Yeah,
who knew that historical wargaming, we might talk about history.
Right?
Just saying.
All right, guys. So this is Bill. For the rest of the crew, we want to thank you for joining us for our D-Day special. Make sure you check out the live stream, or if you're, obviously the podcast is going to go out after the live stream, but check out the recording of the St. Mary Glees airborne operation using the Valor and Victory system, and look out for all our other programming. We are 4 people away from hitting 500 subscribers or followers on Facebook. We're at 500.
Almost there.
We're at 580 subscribers on YouTube. We should hit 600 by the end of June. I hope.
Killing it.
Yeah.
I am hoping that we hit our 1-year goal by June 30th.
That would be awesome, right?
Which is like exactly what we did last year, almost to the hour.
Yeah.
It was It was like 9 p.m. on June 30th last year. We hit our 1 year goal exactly halfway through the year. So maybe we'll do it again this year.
That would be awesome. We only need 20 guys. So everybody out there, if you like, share, subscribe, and tell at least 5 friends or co-workers or, wargaming buddies about our channel, we will definitely hit that in no time flat.
Yeah, grab your wife.
Or be brave.
Not looking at it.
Yeah. So, all right, guys.
Yeah, be brave and share that publicly, because you'd be surprised how many of your friends who, even though you're like, I don't want to share my nerdness with them, are closet nerds. They they might be really interested in that and be like, cool, here's a safe place where I can get introduced to the hobby as well.
You know what?
And sometimes we also talk about history.
Yeah, when it comes to history and historical gaming, we have a little bit of extra protection when it comes to that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. When you go up to somebody and you say, "Hey, I play war games." Oh yeah, we got Space Marines and Jedi, and oh god, people just kind of glaze over. And I played Lord of the Rings and Hobbits. And okay, when you actually say, "Hey, we're doing Parachute Infantry Regiment 505 at Samuel Eglise later today," like it or not, know it or not, admit it or not, there is a certain sliver of additional respect that comes with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if we should be even using the word nerd anymore. I don't think the word nerd applies anymore. I think
I wear it as a badge of honor. I like it.
Right. Yeah, well, there's nerd and geek. I can never remember which one is actually a compliment now and which one is still pejorative. Yeah. I think geek. Because you have like Geek Squad and Apple or whatever. Yeah. I think geek is actually a lot more of a compliment nowadays.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well,
I think of the geeks as more the IT dudes. The really smart guys like you and Chris that can
I was going to say
computers.
What are you trying to say, man? I mean.
Well, on that note, we're going to get the hell out of here.
Before the show, I can't even get Google.
Don't compare me to the geek flag.
All right, guys, we're going to get out of here so we can get going. Thank you, guys, everybody.
For Chris.
And we will see you guys soon.
Bye, all.
You have been listening to the SITREP podcast. We hope you have enjoyed the show. Make sure you like and subscribe to all of our channels on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Discord. Remember to join us every other weekend for a new episode of the podcast, and don't forget our other programming on Wednesdays and Sundays. Thanks for listening.